Hey, what's up, viewer? Welcome back to this Nebulous live development series. This is Day 7, Hour 3. Sorry that I am a little bit terse today. The easiest way I have to describe it is the simple fact that I do not, or more specifically, over the years I just very consistently get a weird feel for doing UI. And that is sticking at this moment, regardless of anything else, really. Oops, I just screwed up my UI here. So, for whatever reason, particular to me, or at least to me, doing UI stuff is there's an extra annoyance for some reason. Not sure why that is. Some people, I think, have the same feelings for other stuff that I like to do, so it might very well just be a diversity thing where it's just my particular notion of doing this kind of UI code, or UI work, UI design, however you would like to call it. But I know I have to get this work done to really kick the game into the next gear. And it's effectively almost there once these values are affecting the game space. More or less, that means that the tech system is skeletalized. It only needs to be expanded from that point, or tweaked, which we're going to see if I can figure out a better way to set these up. As opposed to just using a gigantic tree, which I don't think is it just winds up becoming very tricky to organize. So it's like, I can see where doing it through code is nifty. Alright, so I've got to... There's a few things I've got to do here. What I was working on last time was the design of this data, because essentially the other planets are using components to determine, or they're effectively using other components, and those components are added to collections that have work done on them. And because those collections are using a certain interface, I can effectively combine a vast difference in component types into the array, but have them do basically the same thing. Which because all of the, I guess it's through a component, there's essentially just one component, and then that component is responsible for essentially the player data is going to need each of the tech percentages. And it is going to iterate those percentage values each time it does the iteration tick, which is the same time any infrastructure investments get tossed into the list. However, essentially, each of those components would have their value iterated, but in fact, it is actually iterating, well, actually, because it's using a float value. I guess maybe the float could just like do a property thing and set the player data. Because it's going to have to grab the player data value and do the iteration on the direct value, not the component float, because the component float isn't what the rest of the game is pulling the value from. The rest of the game is pulling the value from the player data, so the player data needs to be what's iterated. Which I think I can do that in the component property, but then we're looking at like 20 references to the player data. But that is kind of the idea, is to all of those values need to be separate because they're all separately investable. And since I'm using a component, it just kind of clears up the referencing. Unless the other thing is the player data could go on the player. Oh, well, it needs a component anyway for the list, is the main thing. Alright, so I'm just going to give it a shot and use components, since they need to get added to the list. So I'm going to add these to, what should I add these to? I suppose I could add them to a research folder. Some point I might need to organize that a little better. But for now I can just say, I'm just going to say this is a research folder. And I have to do my janky mono behavior thing here, which if I do it as a class to start with, I can add more. So I'm just going to add the 3 that I want to get working. to begin with. So we have to have some kind of name for it. So economy research makes sense. It is a mono behavior, and it has the float value interface, if I'm not mistaken. Plus, and we're adding 2 more of these, more or less. This one is called scanning frequency research, and it's not clear yet. This may also, the idea is that this buffs ships as well. So it buffs all scanning and all scan range and all scan frequency potential. So economy research, scanning range. Scanning range research, mono behavior, float value. Okay, so this should in fact create in the research folder 3 components. Okay, it looks like I got all 3 of them here. I've got to implement them. Use Unity engine, and then it says generate interface. Did I name it the wrong interface? I don't think I put an interface down here. Oh, it's ifloat iterate. Okay, so I screwed that up. But I can change it here to just iterate. And then implement it. Same thing up here. It's almost faster just to type it. Alrighty, so now we have to, and this is where it's a little janky because of the memory referencing, but if it doesn't, if each component doesn't reference it, then they still have to on start grab the player data for the subscription, one way or the other, through some other method. Which is plausible because if the economy research components are all on the player data directly, they could just grab the component and they are effectively player data. Might not work in the long run to use components in a list like this, but conceptually it's not too complicated to consider. I mean, these are basically the only times these get used anyway, is like on the economy tick, buffs them, and then once that happens, all it does is change math elsewhere, basically. if it's changing math elsewhere, it's not about the component anymore. The component is just for getting added to the list. I could also just make a research object that has all of them on there. There might also be other... There's going to end up being other stuff. There's going to end up being other potential investment routes. And I guess they're all going to have to use components. So the idea of plugging them all onto the player data might work, it might not work. There's also stuff like this that makes sense to go on the player data. So for now, I'm just going to make a research object. And the research object is just going to grab all of these research components, if it will allow me to select them. Okay. So the research component will I think I'm just going to make them all grab the player data manually. We'll drag these in first thing, and then we can actually hook up the next part pretty simply. We simply grab start with the economy research, and we are effectively getting, we just don't really care about the getter. It's really not even it's only a setter, basically. And to set it, you're actually setting player data. Okay, I see what it's, I don't have a value for it yet, actually. But I suppose you are getting player data, but you're getting a specific value, which I have to write into the player data itself, which was Alt F9, F8, F9, I can't remember, F9. Nope, that's not it. Okay, Alt F12, Alt F8. Well, I could have swore it was one of those, and it is Alt F12. I'm not really organizing this, I'm simply kind of lost my train of thought there, sorry. So now I can actually get the player data's.economy research, or I could set the player data's economy research. Which this is, oh, I didn't put the lambda in here. And is it going to be angry that I'm... Oh, you have to say like equals value or something. and then whatever is assigned to it gets passed through as the value. So through this arrangement, I actually can set the new value with the component. Okay. And we just have to model this more or less in the other two as well. It's almost the same thing, but it's, in this instance, we're changing a few names here to scanning range. Whoops. I can spell it correctly, of course. And it's probably over here we can, I guess we just do the same thing. And we now effectively have a way to add our research values into our investment queue. To where if we use the button, it will begin to increase the value. And to the same extent, it can then be cleared from the list to revert investment. Or not to revert investment, but to yank out the investment option. So set clear investment button. There's also set investment button. Or probably set invest button. And I think I can actually use this function to strategically write this a little better. And then more or less it should like work, basically just work. If I'm not mistaken. Let's try this, set invest button. And it's basically the same thing, isn't it? Same thing, and this is basically the same thing also. Whoops. I want these. Except for this is not clear investment, this is invest. This is the invest button. We need the invest button set first before we So there might be more than one line to do here. Okay, so if they click the investment button, dang, so here's a perfect case in point of why using a function this breaks down easily. I now have two parameters, which is all pretty good, but then when I click the button, I'm now finding myself in need of the opposite clear button. And that button basically reactivates itself. Or no, I guess it never deactivates. The invest button is actually what changes its activation state. So let's, okay. So maybe I can make this work after all. So the first thing I want to do, okay, so if the invest button is clicked, the player data's current investing list needs to add a specific component. And that component just happens to be something that we need to grab from our public research I guess we can just call it a game object. Call it research. And we are going to I'd rather not get it on click every time. Alright, so I could, in fact, I can make it get the component every time, but if I do that, it's going to feel like an opportunity to just put all the components here as variables and then make sure that on each click they change. But I'm not sure if I need to. I'm going to do it. I've been having some solid luck doing it more just-in-time style. So I guess in this instance I could do that. So essentially what we're adding is the research. Dang it, here's... I can't really. I can't... Okay, so if I use a function here I lose the ability to just write everything out here, which is hanging me up for a second. I know I need to get a component, but the problem is whichever component I get has to be like it's some kind of type. So let me see here if I can type from system, type. The name of the type is for research component. And let me see if I can put research component here. It might not like this. Did I spell it incorrectly? No. Yeah, so I don't even think I can go like this. Let me see. So I'm not going to be able to genericize that. Alright, so... yeah, like... this is something that can happen when you start trying to use functions, is that you just don't have the same ability to just write stuff that you need to. Like, I don't have a way to do this get component thing here. I have to do the thing where I list all the components. Then I can just grab one of them and add them. But then, even then, I'm going to have to come up with some way to determine which one to add. And that comes down to, I'm going to have to make like a switch case. That's keyed by research type or something. Which I suppose is a little better than writing all these elements out over and over again. So I'm just going to give it that shot. So for the moment, we've got the economy research. Economy research. Then we have scanning range research. Same thing, I'm going to name it scanning range research. And then scanning frequency research. And we're going to initialize all of these. So economy research equals research.getComponent, and we will cache its economy research component. And then scanning range research is essentially the same thing. We just have to gather its proper component, assign them here, and now our button fallbacks can operate on these values. Which, because of how we set them up, we will be able to basically add these to the list of investables. Let's try this again here. And we honestly just don't know which one to add. It's case dependent. So, unfortunately, we're going to have a switch case. And we are essentially switching to research type. And research type was named something very specifically. And I just have them named exactly what they are. So there's case economy. There's case scanning range. And there's case scanning frequency. And I don't intend on using a default here. Now we have to more or less write this line in here, or set a variable. But I suppose it makes enough sense to just go like this. More or less, this gets copied right in here. You can remove it from here. And we just pick the right component. So in this case, what was it? Economy research. This is basically all we have to do. So the button is clear, or this is one part of it. Is that this subscribes every button. I guess that's a good point. I'm not trying to subscribe every button, am I? Maybe I do need to put the switch outside. Like, basically, and we need a ifloat iterate investment and what we do is, depending on the selection, we will set this to equal the proper value. Then from here we are going to remove this switch case and instead just put investment in here. Except for it's giving me crap because, let me see. It says use of unassigned local variable. Let me see if it will... I can't really default it to anything, can I? Let me see if I can just default constructed here. Nope, no default constructor because it's an interface. What if I just set it equal to default or something? Oh wait, now it's... oh. Okay, so it's not complaining. And that should be enough. Okay, so that will add it as an investment, but if it's added as an investment, of course, we want to take the button and tweak some of its parameters. Those parameters are essentially its... okay, we'll change the style first. So the opacity. And we've been going with 0.65, that makes some sense. I'll have the player data here, so let me check. Player data dot opacity. I thought I had something for this. Never mind. Might not be a bad idea though. Okay, so anyways, now I've got to just set the opacity. Oh, whoops. Oh yeah, no, it's not gonna work. Okay, so we're just gonna hard code it to 0.65, and then also the button needs to get disabled. Now we have a button that will invest in the value. Which I just had a thought. If it's a research investment value, it has a different iterator. Which means it might end up setting it through the property after all. Let's see about that. For now though, we've got the button disabling and lowering its opacity, and it's getting added to the investment list, which means it'll eventually get thrown into the investment queue. Give me 1 second, I might need to grab my dog. Oh, never mind, she ran upstairs. Okay, so we're looking at... I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, the only other thing would be... we could almost clear it the other direction also. It is practically the same thing here. And it doesn't matter... oh, no, it does need to know. So these wound up being these wound up being pretty similar after all. It's the same principle, except for here we're removing... ah, so here, okay, so this is a problem. This one's going to be a little different. So we do need to remove this investment. We need to set its opacity to 1. We need to set... oh, okay, so these are going to be a little different. This needs to be set to true, but we have to come up here and we just have to wind up going like this. It's kind of weird because in this instance now we have essentially grabbed one of the code lines that we tried to remove from the other function. So we wrote the other function to split up the same code, and then we wind up adding some of the same code into this function anyway, which is to grab this button. But this one is not the clear investment button, it is in fact the invest button. And the invest button is actually what is going to get its opacity changed and its activation status reset to on. So that should actually solve every single type we throw in there. We'll do this manual component thing, which isn't the coolest, but it does kind of work. Sorry, cat's trying to interfere. Go away, Stormy. Go. Go away for a little bit. Go away for a little. Come back in a little bit. Alright, so now we just have to... we're going to have to write these functions in here. Okay, so the first thing I can do is just test them. So let's say set invest button from a research category, which was... let me double check. Okay, so it's ship research values. Oh, and technically it is infrastructure research. So it's what infrastructure research values down to economy, right? Oh, let me yank this out. And let me even see if this is getting used anywhere. I guess that was not getting used anywhere. Although I am gonna... no, I'm not. It's doing its own query anyway. So I'm getting hung up here for a second because I don't think I even need this at all right now. All that has to happen is it needs to type in the correct research category, which I think the economy is research type, and I'm simply screwing up what this is. So let me write this like this so I can, once it compiles, it'll stop freaking out. I have to double check how I'm organizing this. So infrastructure research value. I think that's it. Infrastructure research value. Values. Down to economy. And it does the rest through the querying. I can even write another function to stop from having to write the strings twice. So there's one issue I'm picking up on here is that each time this function is called, it's querying the root again and these buttons again for each function call. Which I guess is what I was going to be doing anyway, instead of using a placeholder button. So there's an instance, oh no, I guess I can't do that because they are... I need to query the button separately, basically, so it might be about the same. However, this should be enough then. We should have the ability to first of all turn on and off the button. We can test that first. And then after that, there's code to increment the number is going to be necessary as well. Yeah, it looks like I screwed something up. Yeah, I think it's just that I didn't reference the object. So we close the console and go to the... Let me make sure you even put this component on here. Yeah, down here. I just need to drag this research object into here. And now I should be able to, in fact, at least see if the button turns off properly and turns back on properly. So if I click this, it in fact should work. Okay, good. Which means it's probably disabled. The feedback isn't the same for me to tell, but it should be disabled. So if I click this, it should re-enable. Okay, good. So that is actually working correctly. Actually, if I include it, does it decrease the... Okay, so it's not actually... changing the deficit. Okay, so this should be going down. What, every time the... Or this should go down as soon as the... new type is entered correctly, so... Yeah, it's the same thing. I actually did that in here too. Oh, and I set the Q here as well. So I've got to do that here, set the list, remove the... Okay, so that's a little janky. I almost want to put that behind a function on the player data. As a property, basically. But that is not very, as I have discovered, it's not very structural. And I forgot how I did that over here. Oh, I had to make a new queue. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea. Efficiently speaking. Actually, I'm not sure at all. Because I just need to like reassign the queue that's there. I don't actually need to make a new one. Or, I mean, like, I would imagine I would have to. And I spell this incorrectly, or do I have to use generic collections? And then I also have to... And actually, I'm surprised that the opacity value wasn't being set in there. I guess that's getting set somewhere else, but it's getting set in here. It's a little weird. That's definitely a little strange. I was under the impression that for sure this would unclear would change the opacity. That's really strange. Like, pretty sure. If I click this, I mean, it turns it off, so what the heck? I guess it's getting set on click or whatever. No, that's not right either because the button is just reacting. Okay, so I'm really confused now. I could have swore that these would be changing opacity. So now I'm just really confused. Maybe it's does disabling it alone change the opacity value? Let me test that. Let's see if it just deactivates, does it? Okay, so that's what it is. It's just I don't even need the opacity value. Okay. So the only other thing left then would be to investment needs to accurately oh no, it doesn't need to be that. It's player data dot total economy gain per tick needs to go up because it's not paying as much anymore per investment. And over here it's actually needs both of these lines. And over here we will decrease it since it's being added to the investment option, or being added as an investment option. And then when we add the list, we make a new queue like this. Although I am a little confused here about Unity 3D, C#, or no, I guess it's not. Okay, whatever. Unity 3D C#. Assign a new queue without new. Oh, I don't know. I'm just gonna keep doing it like this. Alright, so this is actually going to be, besides for writing out every single one of these, which I can do even better than this, using like 2 arrays, or it would have to be a lot more than 2 arrays. Well, it would have to be something, but, and I can even come up here and say this, and grab these parameters and simply use them here, and then do this here, but this is just research category, and this one is research type. And now I should be able to just come up here and switch this to set buttons. Okay. Which I suppose that makes some sense functionally also. So now I need to test these. And I think it's still missing a couple crucial factors, which is iterating the value properly. Oh, actually, I might not. I'll have to see if that works or not. It's going to have to iterate a property. Alright, this video is almost done, so let's give this a shot. If I increase the economy here, that went down properly, good. And the economy is ticking less as a result. And if I remove this, it goes up. So besides for the reactiveness being broken, it is working. The problem though is that it's not iterating the percentage value. And I'm pretty sure it's not actually iterating the raw value in the player data. So this isn't going up. Even though it's affecting the economy's deficit properly. Alright, so this video's hit an hour, but I've almost got the everything I'm at to so far is working properly, and my approach with using a function is working. So that's convenient for now. besides for these switch cases, I'd have to run twice, which I might be able to change that also with another function. But for now, I'm going to say sayonara for this vid. And when I return, I'm going to fix this and this. Actually iterating here. Because this, anytime this changes is, or anytime this economy research changes, there's a global modifier on, I suppose the global modifier could just go on the deficit. And effectively the deficit is always hitting a little harder. It's always going up a little harder. Or it's always like, it's always buffing the economy basically, if it's invested in, is the idea. Which will globally buff any economy values given over here. So that's actually really easy to set up that one. Alrighty, so got more to go, but I'm getting it done, so I appreciate it if you've watched it this far, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.